I feel like
Sorry about that. Okay.
that's okay. Yeah, I feel like I'm really preaching to the choir here this morning with all of you. You're the choir. We all sing this. We sing the Dharma together. I'm kind of, I realized reading through my talk that it sounds a little bit like a sermon, so please bear with me. It's actually a talk I've given already at MZMC. I often do that. I'll recycle the same talk for a different audience. And so some of it is focused at people newer to practice than you. And I'm basing this talk on a famous case and one that Dokai has also covered, although from a different angle, slightly different angle. So we start with Yun Men. Yun Men was an astute Zen master. One day a student of his approached and asked a question. What is the goal of a lifetime of practice? And Yun Men's answer, an appropriate response. Yun Men's response is simple, and yet it's really profound. It contains a lifetime of experience. Life happens to us moment by moment. It's up to us to respond appropriately. But what does that mean in different situations? On the most basic level, it means we get up and we brush our teeth. We eat our lunch, then we clean the dishes. Can we just do what the moment asks without mental chatter or complaint? That's the first level of an appropriate response. Just do it. That's what Katagiri used to tell us about getting up in the morning, which, by the way, has become harder and harder for me as I get older. Just do it before thinking kicks in, before electronics take over. On a more complex level, we're having a difficult conversation with someone when they say something that triggers some pretty negative feelings in us. How do we respond? How do we respond with kindness, equanimity, and wisdom in all situations that involve other people, even when we're feeling anger or other strong emotions? That's a good question. Because the Dharma asks this of us, that we be able to do that. You may feel it's too much to ask to be able to respond appropriately to someone who's displaying even mild aggression. And I agree, that it can feel really hard. So we might just try to avoid that conversation or that person, except that we can't always do that. It's not always possible, even if we surround ourselves with people like just the people that are here in this talk today. There comes a time when interpersonal conflict arises, and especially sometimes with the people that are closest to us, partners, Dharma friends that we've known for many years. So we'll probably fail sometimes to give an appropriate response. Though we can practice to help ourselves become more prone to responding appropriately. And I'm defining that as with wisdom, compassion, and equanimity. So I've made the practice of kind speech central to my life and my practice for years now. Counsel process, right speech is taught by Dogen. Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, which Kyoku is teaching now at Clouds, have all helped me to learn and practice with more skill. There are times when silence is an appropriate response, but most times we need to respond verbally. Nonviolent communication especially is really helpful in times of conflict, because it's about identifying one's feelings and needs and then being able to express them to another in a way that avoids judgment and evaluation. And learning it takes overcoming this awkwardness we have about learning a completely new skill that's kind of foreign to the way we're taught to communicate. Marshall Rosenberg says our language itself is violent. So the big thing that it takes to do this practice, not only of nonviolent communication, but of any kind of kind speech and wise speech, is it takes a commitment and a willingness to stay in relationship with the other person. And that's big, because oftentimes we just feel like turning away, or maybe we feel like the other person isn't worth our time, the trouble, and so we distance ourselves. So this is key, is to be able to use this. We can't turn away or put the other person out of our lives. We have to be willing to stay in communication, to stay intimate, as it were, with that other person. So I'm defining an appropriate response always to another person as compassion. And compassion, it's said, comes out of emptiness. So our practice, of just silent sitting, we often enter into emptiness with that. And out of that can come a compassionate response. The Heart Sutra, which we chant all over the Zen world on a daily basis, and seems to negate all the other teachings that come before us and all the concepts of form and emptiness. We learn from studying Prajnaparamita, however, that compassion arises out of this teaching. The goddess Prajnaparamita is depicted as clear-eyed, in touch completely with reality, and yet the essence of compassion. Christina Feldman gives us this. There are two aspects of compassion from the Pali, anukampa and karuna. We're most familiar with karuna, right? Anukampa means to tremble with. That points to the empathic dimension of compassion. That's the part of us that resonates with the distress of another person and empathizes with them. Karuna captures the dimension of compassion that responds to the situation and seeks to alleviate distress through action. Through response. So there's a dynamic relationship between the two aspects of compassion, because our engagement in the world needs to be attuned to the situation, which requires us to be fully present, be open, and listen deeply, like Avalokiteshvara. What if our practice is all about developing the capacity to respond more appropriately to the whole spectrum of human experience? We celebrate birth and we feel joy around it. We enter deeply into the profundity of death and learn what it has to teach us, and everything in between these bookends. And these two words, anukampa and karuna, with their different meanings, point to the way we can attune ourselves to respond more compassionately through deep listening in the present moment to people, situations, events, and our own hearts. So when I first started my chaplaincy program in 2007, I hoped I would get some basic skills to help me figure out what to do when visiting a patient or their families. I wanted tools for my toolkit. I wanted to be able to offer them something concrete, and I was hoping they would teach us what that was, how to do it. But actually, they didn't. They didn't give us any tools. They immediately on the first day threw us into visiting patients without any kind of introduction except a tour of the hospital and how to use the computers. So, we would go in and visit, and we would just kind of tremble within, hoping that we would be able to respond in a way that was helpful. And then we would write a verbatim, word by word report of what happened in that meeting. What did the patients say? What did the family members say? How did we respond? And then we bring that to our group and get feedback. And that was how we learned, just through in. And you learn by doing, and you learn by the feedback you got from other people. And then they would they would talk a little bit about best practices in those meetings, but mostly it was just throw you in. So I learned from all this exposure to person after person and difficult situation after difficult situation, that the best things I had to offer was my open presence and deep listening. And sometimes it takes chaplains months to figure this out. That basically what's the most helpful to people is what we're learning to do in Zen. To be open, to be present, and to be caring, compassionate. So sometimes I gave appropriate responses, and sometimes I felt really ineffectual and that I had nothing to offer. That was hard. It was really hard. And this is like what life is. We're just thrown in to situation after situation that we've never experienced before. And we have to figure out what is the appropriate response in that situation. We learn by doing, and we refine that by the feedback we get from other people, from the world itself. So Christina Feldman offers a practice to help us attune ourselves and to make us more prone to an appropriate response. And it's called Just Like Me. In situations of distress, you practice seeing the common humanity and shared vulnerability we all have. When we experience someone behaving in a way we consider unskillful or even wrong, oh, just like me, is a recognition that we all share foolishness, reactivity. Greed, anger, and ignorance arises in all of us and endlessly. So it's not about something we accomplish, it's about the intentions we commit to and embody in daily life. And those practices of deep listening, kind speech, equanimity, and compassion all help us make us more prone to an appropriate response. Just as we say, Zazen makes us more prone to awakening, hopefully. So karuna, or compassion itself, is another activity. It's actually an activity of seeing beyond this automatic reactivity of our conditioning. And it's a striving to achieve the goals of an impossible bodhisattva vow. Those 4 vows that we chant here every Sunday and vow to carry out necessitate the development of compassion, along with all the 4 Brahma Viharas, 6 paramitas, all the teachings, the Eightfold Path. According to Pema Chodron, really being present for another, your child, your partner, a friend, a client, even a homeless person, as Pema says, means not shutting down on that person, which means, first of all, not shutting down on ourselves. That means allowing ourselves to feel whatever we feel, not pushing it down or away. It means accepting every aspect of ourselves, even the parts we don't like. And doing this, it requires patience and openness and commitment, plus basically not fixating or holding on to anything. So we might find when we're practicing at the beginning that we're evaluating and judging ourselves constantly, or at least it feels that way. And it may be that we are doing that, but with practice, as all of you know, we begin to do that less and less. That wears out. We see ourselves do it again and again and again, and we just get tired of it. And eventually we drop it. So insight into our patterns, which happen because of our practice also, and the willingness to allow them to change, becomes wisdom. Attending to our own feelings and needs and then to others becomes compassionate action, karuna. So our tradition gives us a lot of teachings that we can focus on that help us with this. And it inclines us to this ongoing possibility of the appropriate response that Yunmen's talking about. But I find I have to reset my intention over and over again. When I see myself slip up, which I do, then I just have to reset my intention about what I want. So Yunmen's simple response is short and enigmatic, like many of these cases, interactions between monks and masters. But behind it is a lifetime of study, practice, and teaching. And I posit that this practice of an appropriate response will be a lifetime practice for all of us. And it's difficult moment by moment, with what comes at us in the world, to remember this. There's always the breaking news, news of war and news of climate destruction and racial injustice and the pandemic. And this is coming at us all the time. Oh. It says my battery is low. Excuse me for a moment while I plug in my computer. It came undone. Here, a little commercial break. That'll be great in the recording, right? So this kind of constant drumbeat of what's happening that's negative is overwhelming. Sometimes I become overwhelmed by it. So at that time, our practice is just to be overwhelmed. Can we be an overwhelmed bodhisattva? Can we see ourselves like that? And then when we're not overwhelmed anymore, we can come back to these practices and intentions. They'll be there. And they're a path in training us to be completely and fully ourselves. And from that fullness comes an appropriate response. Then we can be tender with our fragile lives. When we are fully ourselves, we see that tenderness. And we see that fragility and tenderness in others, and we really appreciate them because we know they're not going to be around forever. We know we're not going to be around forever. When we see things like this, we can respond to things just as they are, as difficult as that is sometimes. We can be generous with our lives. We can also be patient, mindful, relaxed, and open. You know, even and maybe especially at the beginning of our practice, when we're open to all the things we were learning, we really had beginner's mind. So now the challenge is to reconnect with beginner's mind now that we've been practicing, studying, and living life for years. We can be open to myriad possibilities for a kind, equanimous, compassionate response that does no harm and builds connection and community. So that's my little sermon today. And even though you've heard these things before many times, it's always good to hear them again. We need repetition. We need to hear these teachings. Does anybody have a comment now or a question or anything they want to add? I know Ado put something in the chat. Oh, resetting our intentions is helpful advice. That's right. Yeah, thank you, Ado.
I have a comment to make.
Hi, Mary.
Hi. I appreciate one thing that really struck me that you said was not something like shutting down to yourself. I mean, everything you've said today is stuff that I'm thinking about right now. And it is, you're right. It's really helpful. We've all heard it before, but it's hard to retain that wisdom. And I think that's really important. Even the bad parts. I mean, the parts that you try to disown or pretend that you don't like. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Mary. Tim.
Yes, so my thought isn't completely formulated yet, so I'm going to make it up as I go. But when it comes to being present with another person, it seems it's often a great distraction for me. The thing I want different. This comes up with work when they're trying to have me train someone in a way that makes no sense. So first there's the, disrespect that they're telling me how to train the person when I've been doing the job for so many years. And then there's the, not wanting to train them 1 hour one day, 3 hours the next, skip 2 days, 45 minutes the next day. There's a just strong attachment to wanting to do it in a way that makes sense and wanting to, so there's two things going on at once. There's the, emotions of feeling disrespected, and then there's also the desire for things to go the way I want. And that's just very difficult practice. And then it, it gets compounded by thinking about this for several days ahead of time when it's the weekend, like right now. And so it builds its extra energy, and the practice of letting that go is sometimes it goes well, sometimes not so easy. But that's all I had to say.
Yeah, that's a good example of a complex situation, Tim, and I just want to say that in nonviolent communication, feeling disrespected, well, that's more of of an evaluation. There's a feeling underneath that evaluation, so that it's recommended to get in touch with the actual feeling. So is that anger, or is that despair? It might be despair in your situation, but just to really look at how we speak about feelings and unmet needs. So you would, if your feeling was anger at having to do this, or frustration, maybe frustration, there'd be an unmet need there, which it sounds like is, respect in this case. That your unmet need is for respect. Anyway, that's a good example of the difficulty in actual situations in our lives. Thank you. I find that the person that it's hardest to just simply be very present and available to is my spouse, who's on this at this meeting, because we're together so often in the house, and I do some things that irritate him, like talk to him from another room when he can't hear me, or I'll take for granted what his response is going to be because I think I know him so well. And so that's my richest area of practice is with him, is to actually practice this with him and to actually sit down, put away my phone, put away those distractions, and just listen to him, be present for him. And so if you live alone, then it's your relationship with yourself. This is the biggest one. You notice how well are you attending to your own feelings, reactions, and needs, unmet needs.
Can I add to what I said earlier? Because what you said triggered this. I think there are times when I don't even know when I'm disowning parts of myself. And if I pay attention and don't shut down on myself, then I'll realize sometimes, become aware of what I'm doing, and then realize that that disowning isn't necessary, or that it's not even, I'm not even aware when I'm judging myself, and then all these behaviors come out of that when I don't even know what I'm doing. And that just remembering not to shut down, I think it's a good reminder because then you're uncovering all sorts of information for yourself, or wisdom for yourself, in terms of, are you being, are you even judging yourself about things that you don't really, in principle, want to judge, feel like they're judgmental things, things you should be judgmental about. Anyway, sorry, I had a revision there.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's a lifetime practice, is that we do tend to go unconscious a bit about our own, what's going on with us, it's easy to do. Okay.
I have a comment.
Okay.
I'll say that as time has gone on, it seems like the practice I'm doing now in spiritual practice, or any kind of practice, is really gotten much simpler. It's just breathing, and there's no special thing to do in Zazen except just pay attention to my breath. That's it. That's enough. That's hard enough. And and I don't even try to count to 10 anymore. I just try to make it to 3 and start over. They seem to be regressing. But and then this koan that you've mentioned really seems like that's almost the whole deal, just an appropriate response. There's nothing else to try to just, combined with kindness and compassion and wisdom, and don't always have to be nice, but it's like, so it's just, how do you find that perfect place, or that, I don't know if there's a perfect place, but just an appropriate place to make a response. I thought I'd bring up something kind of interesting that's happening at Hokyoji right now. There's a retreat going on, and it's called the Great Midwestern Reset Retreat. So Phoebe, that fits into Phoebe's Ado's chat responses. But it's a group of first responders. Some are policemen, some are firefighters, some are 911 operators, and some are with EMT response people, just really meeting that emergency situation. And you got to find a way to respond to it. It's trauma. They're facing trauma every day that they work. So not unlike a chaplain, except the chaplain isn't very first on the line,
No.
So, but anyway, but and I don't know a whole lot about what they're doing, except that I walked in and I saw this thing on the video screen where they said, just breathe. So that the theme of this retreat is focusing on breathing. That's what the whole leader is focusing on. So it's quite interesting. And as you're giving your talk, and all I'm seeing out my window that they're laying down in the ground on yoga mats, right now, which kind of concerns me because
Yeah. I'm glad they're on mats.
yeah. But yesterday, one of the people participating in the retreat said, "Oh, we did such a wonderful thing yesterday. We took a walk in the woods barefoot." And I went, "Oh."
Uh-oh.
And she was going on and saying about just feeling the sensations under your feet and things like that. And then I asked, did it end with a tick check? She said, "Oh, yes, we're very aware of that." So it's, but this is the first time a group has come to Hokyoji that hasn't been like a Qigong group or someone who we know or that we've gotten to know through, or someone I know or someone else knows. This just a group of non-Buddhists, and we're cooking for them, and good karma or not, we're cooking meat. So that's a new experience. Well, anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. And something else came to my mind right when you were starting. I don't know why. But several years ago, at least 5 now, I was taking and this relates to how things come up with people who are closest to you, how you bump up against them almost more easily. But once I was in Myanmar, Rangoon, I think, and I was crossing a street, and in Myanmar, the traffic rules, the pedestrian rules are a little different. The cars sort of, it doesn't matter, they have the right of way. Well, I crossed on a yellow light, and I didn't quite make it to the end before it turned red, and the car came up and bumped me.
Oh.
And I just went ballistic. That's the quickest amount of kind of anger I've ever experienced. I didn't do anything like smash his windshield in or something, but boy, I was walking down the street, just muttering the worst cuss words you can possibly imagine. I was keeping them under my breath, And then the person who was walking in front of me about 12 feet away kind of stopped and they turned around and looked at me. And I thought, oh, I think I'm maybe muttering a little too loud. So, anyway, so I got it back under control, but oh my gosh, it was like just this explosive anger out of probably not being respected, something like that.
You had an unmet need for being safe.
Yeah, you can put it that way. Although I would advise you, Ekyo, don't talk from another room to your husband.
Yes.
I would say practice that one.
That is something that I really need to practice, and I'm trying to be more mindful of that.
Yeah, I sometimes people do that here at Hokyoji, and I don't have the greatest hearing anyway, so sometimes I just say, I didn't hear it. So, anyway, okay, that's enough from me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dokai.
Okay.
Can I make a comment on what Dokai just said?
Sure.
It's triggered something, a memory that I remember once Hojo-san saying that sitting zazen can actually make that anger flashpoint. He didn't say that this way, but quicker. Like that, and it didn't. I remember thinking, well, how does that comport with you telling us not to get angry and that, you know? I mean, other messages he gave us about anger, but he said that if you sit zazen, that tendency to get angry could come more quickly. I mean, you've been sitting zazen for years, Dokai, but
Yeah. Well, it came really quick in that situation. Maybe you're just aware of what's happening more quickly. So, I mean, I didn't, besides muttering under my breath, I didn't act on it, as far as trying to hurt somebody and, after about a minute or two, well, no, it took longer than that. But anyway, it kind of settles down pretty quick, especially when I saw the other person kind of stop and turn around. What's going on behind me? And I thought, I thought no one was hearing me muttering, but somehow they were picking the energy up. So. And one other comment, you said, living with people, and then you mentioned living alone, and I think both have advantages and disadvantages. I live a lot of the time alone, and one of the disadvantages is you don't have a partner that keep you in check, or to say, don't talk to me from the other room. So, you can just sort of go around, do what you want, and there's no one there to kind of keep, hey, you're getting off here a little bit, to do a reset. So it's one of the disadvantages. I think several of us in this group spend a lot of time alone. So.
Right. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I always love to hear all your comments and appreciate your listening.
Well, thank you so much, Ekyo. Deeply appreciated your talk today. Next week's speaker is Jodo Cliff Clusen. And please go to Hokyoji's website on the calendar and you'll find the people speaking for June. And there's a just sitting retreat coming up. And I'll go through the events for June and July, or May, June, and July. There's a Loring group retreat, a group that sits in Loring Park once. I'm not quite sure how often, but I think a couple times a week. I'm not sure, but
it's weekly, yeah.
Okay. So they're a new retreat coming up, and then we have a Clouds-in-Water retreat coming first or second week of July. So again, Hokyoji is supported by donations. So if you feel so inclined, please go to the webpage and make a donation. We always like it if you like us on Facebook and all of our messages, and tell your friends. So that helps us along quite a bit. So thank you all. And let's see, why don't we close now with our 4 great, what do we call them? Great chants or vows. Sorry, I've been on vacation a long time. Okay, here we go. Beings
are numberless.
I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. A Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Thank you all. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Friends.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.